Hey, I'm Rachel.
And I'm Amanda.
I'm Hannah.
And I'm Kathleen.
And this is the federal election edition of Beyond a Ballot, powered by DoorDash. Welcome to Beyond a Ballot. I'm Hannah Thibodeau, and it is late on Wednesday evening, April 2nd. President Donald Trump has done it again, managing to make our election about him. Now, Trump dubbed it Liberation Day for the United States, but I think for Canadian leaders on the campaign trail, let's call it Aggravation Day. And I think I'm actually making that a little bit too light. However, unlike any country, other countries, Canada did dodge new Trump tariffs. So we want to get right into this. We have our powerhouse panel of politicos ready to dig in, but I do want to say I'm sorry to Kathleen Monk. She is literally in the air right now, so she can't be with us.
But she tried.
She did try. Things went late today, but we felt it was important to do this podcast. Let's start with Amanda Alvaro. Liberal leader Mark Carney again hit pause on the stump to slip into his prime minister's role. How did he handle it today? And talk a little bit about what we heard from Donald Trump.
So I assume that Prime Minister Carney was watching the same press conference that we were watching, which was the president in the Rose Garden delivering almost an hour-long press conference, complete with visuals and charts, and extra spokespeople who came up to the mic from the auto workers. There was bad news, and then there was maybe less bad news, depending on how you want to frame it. The bad news was the 25% tariffs on auto, which we expected to come into effect at midnight tonight. That is happening, and Carney did respond to that. In less bad news, I'm not going to call it good news because nothing that comes from Trump is good news, but in less bad news, he applied reciprocal tariffs globally to a large number of nations. Canada and Mexico were off that list, seemingly to honor the trade agreement that we have, CUSMA, between the three nations. So there was a 10% baseline tariff on goods coming into the US, but Canada and US was off that list. It didn't mean that he didn't take swipes at Canada. He certainly did. You know, he made that false claim again that the US subsidizes Canada by $200 billion a year. He took some major swipes at supply management. And then Carney's response was later in the evening. He had met with the U.S. Canada committee. He had met with cabinet, and he said that we're going to fight these tariffs with countermeasures. He said that the U.S. signaled today that it may impose tariffs on things like pharmaceuticals, lumber, and semiconductors. So still watching for that. And he said that in a crisis, it's important to come together. It's essential to act with purpose and with force, and that's what we'll do.
Rachel, let's just talk about the tariffs first, and then we'll get into the how it's affecting the election campaign. Were you sitting there when Donald Trump was holding up that poster? I swear, I have my glasses on, and I was so close to the monitor, and everybody was looking for Canada. Talk a little bit about what your first reaction was. I just want to hear that first.
I mean, I think that people were somewhat relieved. I don't want to downplay the auto tariffs. Like, that is a huge impact on Canada and our auto sector and our workers. And so we're in a bad spot no matter what. Not being on that list, I think the first part of the list came out, everybody took a bit of a sigh of relief that we're not getting new tariffs that are compounded with the ones he'd already announced. Then more of a list came out with even more countries, and everybody held their breath again. And then we found out, okay, Canada's actually not on that one either. And there was a bit of a sigh of relief. So this, since day one of the Trump administration, has been the wildest political, emotional, economic roller coaster that Canadians have ever been on. And it continues. And we saw today, we expected there would probably be tariffs. Ultimately, we saw that there aren't, but still not a good position for Canada.
Yeah. she's our pal, Vashi Kapelos. She
Yeah,
had
we
on
love
Stephen
Vashi.
Polos. Yeah,
Yeah.
everybody loves Vashi. She had Stephen Polos on tonight. So I found, and former governor of the Bank of Canada, what I found interesting from him is he said, look, yeah, a little bit of a reprieve when it comes to us not getting any new tariffs, but looking at what this is going to do globally, he said the R word, a global recession.
Oh, yeah.
So I know. And it's just like, oh, now
He
I have
had
to get,
every country in the world listed on that list. That was surprising for many people.
I'm not Russia,
Oh, not Russia. I missed
not
that.
Russia.
Well, every
Yeah.
other tiny little nation he could think of was on that list.
Let's go to how this is affecting the campaign trail because it is happening. It's the main topic on this.
Oh, yeah.
Amanda, how did Mr. Carney handle it today? Let's talk about him. You know, he has put himself back, taken himself off the election campaign in the prime ministerial role, but it is still affecting the election campaign too.
Yeah, and I think, we've talked about this. We saw Premier Doug Ford had to play that dual role as well in the Ontario election. And with news coming south of the border almost daily, it really has rocked the Carney campaign. And some would say it's been an advantage to his campaign as well, because it's allowed Canadians to really see him in that seat as prime minister. Of course, he was only prime minister for 9 days before he went to an election. So he gets to wear that hat. He gets to sit in the chair and act prime ministerial because he is the prime minister. He gets to remind Canadians that he's taking a leadership position on the issue that they care most about right now, which is how we deal with Trump, how we deal with this tariffs. I think also there was a bit of a temptation to celebrate tone. Um, I don't know that I buy into this idea of celebration quite yet, but
Yeah.
there is the notion that Prime Minister Carney had this conversation, this phone call with President Trump, and that the tone had changed. The way that Trump referred to Canada, again in today's press conference, there was no mention of the 51st state. There was no mention of the governor of Canada. I think those things are good. It doesn't mean that they'll last. It doesn't mean that we won't see a change of tune. And I think there's a temptation from the Liberal campaign to say, that's a win. It might be too early to call it a win, but it may be, it may signify the idea that these two leaders could work together to the advantage of Canada.
Rachel Siegel, I want to bring you in on this because conservative leader Pierre Poilievre has tried to convince Canadians that the election isn't just about Trump and trying to remind them that there are so many other issues Canadians need to also consider before casting their ballot. So is that message landing, do you think?
I mean, I think it has landed for sure. I think there's the Canadians that are in food bank lineups, the Canadians that have their 35-year-old kids living in their basement. I mean, we need to talk to those Canadians as well. This is a huge issue, the tariffs, the global issues, of course. But we cannot discount our domestic issues and the questions around affordability, which obviously the Trump tariffs play into. Amanda says that Carney is able to wear both hats like Doug Ford did. Obviously, that was a calculation when calling this election, because you have to remember we weren't supposed to go to the polls until October. To the credit of the Liberals, there was many reasons to go to an election right now, but knowing this date of these tariffs definitely played into this decision too. Because and I've said it before, it's one thing to be auditioning for prime minister, and it's the other thing to be able to be prime minister. Now, the interesting thing for me today was this juxtaposition between Pierre Poilievre, who hosted a breakfast in Toronto and did a bar burner of a speech this morning. It's worth watching, with Mark Carney, who was also very prime ministerial in his kind of offhanded press conference later in the day. Pierre came out. He said he talked about retaliatory tariffs. He talked about using force to reinforce our sovereignty. These were really strong commitments to respond to whatever tariffs were coming out later in the day. Mark Carney, on the other hand, I will give him a shout out, to my daily call out for some of his language, because he said, we will fight back, we will protect workers, and we will build the strongest economy. we as conservatives love three things when we talk about messaging. We usually have three things in our back pocket. That message was very clear from Prime Minister Carney. And I think both leaders today presented to Canadians what their role would be if they continue on or become Prime Minister after the federal election. So I think both making the pitch to Canadians of how they would handle these tariffs.
Let me just ask this, and I'm going to ask both of you this. Do you think Mr. Carney has an advantage? Because I think we have to go back to wartime where any other, and even back then, I don't know, I wasn't alive, but putting themselves from a campaign into the prime minister's spot, it's never happened in our memory. This is 2 times for Mr. Carney. Do you think that gives him an advantage? I want to ask you both, and we have about 30 seconds each. Amanda, you first.
Yeah, I do think it gives him an advantage. And I think that, they're seizing the advantage, but they also cannot not seize the advantage, right? Like
Right.
you must play that role at this time. He cannot take a back seat at this time. Canadians expect him to be in that chair. They expect him to present Canada's position, and they expect him to protect workers and protect jobs and protect our economy. But is it advantageous to the campaign? Of course it is, because it's the single biggest issue facing Canadians right now. It's what we care about. It's what we're tuning into. It's what we want to talk about.
Rachel, I'm going to give you the final word on this one. What do you think?
Of course it is. And I'll tell you why. First of all, we have a very fickle electorate right now, but also the electorate doesn't like to change governments typically in times of crisis. So when you hear Mark Carney talking right now, we are in a crisis. We are, Donald Trump is this massive power that is going to impact our whole, he's trying to create this urgency.
He's calling you.
Sorry. He's trying to create urgency around the electorate choosing a leader that is going to fight Trump. And so I think ultimately they are playing on that message. We, on the conservative side, will have to put to Canadians, in order to combat that, the understanding of exactly what Pierre Poilievre will do to combat Trump, which I think he did really well this morning, and really sell to Canadians the idea that we need both strong leadership on the Trump file and also leadership on fixing the last, what does he call it? The lost liberal decade.
I am going to have to end it there. It zipped right on by. That's it for us today. Kathleen Monk will be back with us tomorrow as long as she lands in time. No tariffs here, just the free trade of sharp political insight.
Thank you for listening. New episodes come out daily, and you can find Beyond a Ballot on Instagram and wherever you find your podcasts. A huge thank you to our title sponsor, DoorDash, and sponsors Equal Voice, Page, and Canada Powered by Women for making this election special possible. Speak to you tomorrow.